Welcome to Studio 58A here at the Jamaica Information Service. My name is Vaughn Davis. I'll be your host, and today here with me is Dr. Gillian Mason, community psychologist. And today we'll be discussing the topic of domestic abuse. It's one that's never really far from discussion. It's something that unfortunately is continuous, and with that in mind, we're here to discuss elements of domestic abuse that perhaps don't get discussed as much, because domestic abuse in many cases begins before the actual first punch or first blow is thrown, and there are a lot of psychological components, so we'd like to discuss some of that. And we're going to just go over to Dr. Mason now, and well, let us just welcome you here.
Thank you.
And okay, so Dr. Mason, domestic abuse, as I said, in many cases begins before the blow is thrown. There are many tactics that abusers tend to use to create an environment in which they can get away with what they want to do.
That's right.
Can you talk about some of the tactics, some of the things that abusers do in the outset that kind of prepare or to create the environment that can allow them to get away with what they do?
Right. Yeah, you're quite right, Vaughn. And it's important to realize that domestic abuse is not just about the physical. And there are all different forms of abuse that can occur. Physical, obviously, sexual and emotional or psychological, which is really what you want to focus on for today. And in all cases, in some cases, there are actually persons who are not physically abused, but are still abused because they go through the psychological control from their abuser. And control, you mentioned also in your introduction, is so important. That is really all that domestic abuse is about. That one person is trying to control the other person in terms of their thoughts, in terms of their actions, how they spend their money, whether they are allowed to use contraceptives. They're all different forms of controlling a person. So yes, quite often you're going to see that the psychological occurs before the
in
physical.
Doing research and prepping for interviews, some of the things I came across are tactics that involve jealousy, isolation, financial dependence.
That's right.
And it kind of escalates from there. Can
That's
we just
right.
take a few of those individually and just go into them?
Yes, right. I'm going to start with jealousy, because jealousy is something that we kind of almost want to see. We kind of almost will boast. Exactly, almost boast at our
wants
right. But we need to realize that jealousy is a form of control, and it is really does not have to be a part of a loving relationship. And so those kind of jealous tactics, those seemingly minute behaviors, like telling somebody what they should wear or wanting to know where they are at all times, that people might say, oh, he calls me 20 times a day, or she calls me 20 times a day because she loves me, or because she cares and she wants to know where I am. No, that may not be what is happening. And in any case, if you have a trusting relationship, there's really no need, even if the person is not intending to control you, there's really no need to check in with your partner 20 times a day. So what happens quite often is that these kind of small, in quotation marks, tactics are employed, and as you're saying, it kind of lures the partner into a kind of sense of security, like this is how things should be.
Exactly. Yes.
And then
it's a normal, healthy relationship.
Exactly, which is why I'm saying that we really want to, encourage persons to realize jealousy does not have to be a part of a relationship, and it should not be something that we strive for, because that is a really easy kind of way to
springboard into
yes,
other kind of forms of negative behavior.
Right. So you talked about financial control, and as I said, as mentioned, the issue of contraceptives, and I've known several women who have been in abusive relationships where one of the things the partner did was to control the contraceptives, which then meant that the woman had multiple children, which of course increased her financial dependence. Exactly, which is exactly what he was aiming for. And it's because these things just kind of happen, or seem to just kind of happen. We always have to be, I don't say on the lookout, because it's unfortunate to think about being in a relationship and kind of always being on your P's and Q's. Okay. But
it should be natural. It should be comfortable.
Right. Everybody wants to be, as natural. That have to think about, is this person, does this person have ill intentions? But what I always say is that, especially when the relationship is young, when your those gut feelings that we have, when it just get this little thing, we need to pay attention to it. And quite often we just say, no, 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 it doesn't mean anything, and we just continue. It doesn't mean that the person, just because you get that feeling, that it means that the person is going to be abusive, but at least you should then examine, why am I feeling exactly? Why am I feeling this way?
One
Is
of
there
the
something
things
happening?
I came across, I don't know if how extensive or how often this happens, is that you find that persons, as we say in Jamaica, don't know who for frightened. So when you will have a situation where, for example, a man who fancies himself as pretty handsome might choose a girl who might not necessarily look or match up, in terms of looks and appearance and that kind of thing. And so what you create is a power dynamic where, because he's the more handsome of the pair, she is more willing to keep, in order to keep him, she'll do whatever. And that is, I think, is that an element of the psychological control as well?
Right. So yeah. So this is a kind of touchy area, because we don't want people to feel that
Exactly.
they have to be a victim. But yes, you're quite right. That quite often we see that a person who has been victimized in one abusive relationship does have a number of them, and it is I don't blame it everything on self-esteem. So some persons may sense that somebody is particularly vulnerable and is in need of reassurance, exactly, and they see it as an opportunity. But I don't want to say that's what happens in 100% of the cases.
Of course, yes, because yes,
right,
it's something to be vigilant of, to be on the lookout. Keep it in your mind, because I suppose it's a possibility.
It is a possibility, and so two things related to that I want to mention, Vaughn. One is that if somebody is in an abusive relationship and manages to end it, to get out safely, I think it's very important that they take some time to just kind of process and reflect on what happened in that relationship, because I think sometimes the person moves on to another relationship kind of so quickly before they've really healed from all that they've experienced, that again it makes them vulnerable to another abuser. Right. Yeah.
All right. And in turn, there's another one I want to look at, is isolation, because that's one that we find it's connected to jealousy. Because, I mean, for example, in doing research, once again, I came across in situations where, for example, an abuser would go to the person's workplace and cause a scene, get the person fired, and then now the person is unable to really connect with anybody else, or even go to their home and create friction between them and other relatives, so that they can't have any other outlets to channel their feelings into. So the person is isolated and dependent on the abuser alone.
Right. Yeah, so you have hit on all the right things, right? Isolation, which increases dependence. And yes, again, this is something I can start seemingly innocuous. Why are you always going out with your friends? Why you have to go out with Mary all the time? Why are you always calling your sister? And again, it creeps up, in increments, until you realize, hold on, I haven't seen my sister in like 2 months, and I haven't spoken to whomever that I normally speak to. And the person the abuser is trying to isolate you, because the more that they can have you to themselves, or him or herself, they can control you. So yes, so again, it's a matter for us to, in our relationships, to reflect on what is actually happening, and realizing these tactics that could be used. So if you're finding that, on a Saturday night I normally did whatever
with your
friends or whomever, and now it's been a month since I've done that. No, try and break the habit, and challenge the person and say, no, I am going out. This is important to me. Our relationship is important, but so is my relationship with my sister or my whoever it is. So yes, so you want to kind of, as I said, break out of the jealousy, the isolation. Don't just accept them as, okay, it's just part of a normal relationship.
So based on your experience and in talking to women and looking at victims and survivors and so on, what would you say are, the key red flags, if there are any, that could kind of get your antennas up to say, okay, maybe this is a situation I need to start thinking about withdrawing myself from, so I can prevent a potential attack on me or something like that.
Right. Well, we've talked about some of them already, and the most important thing is just being aware, especially early in the relationship, as to what changes are occurring in my life because of this relationship, right? Because normally, of course, there are going to be changes. But if it is that, boy, I used to like wearing my tight jeans, and I'm not wearing my jeans anymore, and then when you realize that, hold on, it's because every time I put on the jeans, my partner is saying, no, this isn't right. Or, as I said, with the isolation, this is what I used to do, on a weekly basis. I used to go and meet with my friends, and I'm not doing this anymore. then something may be wrong, right? So it's just and again, don't forget those gut feelings. You know, once you're getting that little flutter in your stomach, at least stop and examine, why am I having this feeling? Why am I having this feeling?
I want you to weigh in on a piece of information I came across. It's something I was reading. It said that some women will take up to 37 instances of abuse before they finally get the courage or are in a position where they decide to leave. Is this something that you think is valid, or is it something that seems more academic?
Oh, okay. Well, I am an academic, so that's fine. But I haven't heard that piece of statistics. I've heard in terms of leaving a relationship, it often takes a woman, I think it's about at least 7 attempts before she leaves. But again, it's along the same lines. I would imagine that actually a number of if you're talking about physical abuse, then it might even be more than 37. And yeah, it's important to understand the nature of relationships, right? And which is why it will take the 7 times of leaving, it will take the 37 or more attempts of or actual instances of abuse, because a bond is formed. Exactly. Right?
That's true.
And persons often forget that a relationship that has abuse in it is still a relationship. So there are other things going on other than the abuse. These people may be parents and they have children who they love and they care for, and you know they have good parts of their relationships.
That's true.
So when abuse occurs, it then kind of facilitates making excuses, if you want to say. I hate to use the word excuses, but justifying why I'm not going to leave, or why I'm going to, right, a kind of rationalization. So these things do occur, and it would not be surprising, as I said, if that number of kind of physical abuse is actually higher. Of course, it depends on the length of the relationship, and again, the nature of the relationship, because some relationships are extremely physically abusive, and others, there may be none, or very rare instances of physical abuse, but it doesn't mean that the control of the person is not there. Yeah.
And another thing that tends to come out on persons from the outside looking in, seem to find it impossible to understand, is the connection where, in many cases, victims of abuse tend to still have that connection where, in many cases, some of them still call their abuser, some of them still feel emotionally attached.
Exactly.
Even after the years of abuse, even after separating and moving themselves away. There's something I can read for you. It says, "There was a period when I thought, I have to go back to him. I had this gut-wrenching feeling, it's horrible, that I just couldn't live without him no matter how badly he treated me. That's something I had to get over. That's something I had to get over."
Right.
That.
Yes, right. And that is also, again, a common feature. Partly, as I said, because there are other aspects to the relationship other than the abuse. And that emotional connection does not just break because you have left this person. And even though, you know, there are aspects of the person that you do not want, and speaking about the abuse, but then there are other aspects that you're drawn to. So, you know, this person was still always, I don't know, kind to his family, whatever it was, you know, a good provider for his children, or would just make me feel comfortable. But at the same time, yes, this abuse was going on, and I know it's not good for me, but I still want to know how the person is doing. You might be, you know, feel kind of sorry for the person. Not in a pity way, but just that this is somebody who you care for.
A major part of your life for a period of time.
Exactly.
It's not that it's just sever that
No,
connection.
it isn't. And there's also the the issue of what we call learned helplessness.
Okay.
Which can occur when we were talking earlier about persons being in multiple abusive relationships. This may, or being victims of violence in different ways. This can often happen because, so learned helplessness is the idea that if you're in a situation and you get to the point where you feel you have no control, then you kind of accept where you are, and you manage, you find tactics for surviving in the in that situation, but you no longer fight, you no longer try and get out of it. And oftentimes we will see persons who have been in abusive or who are in abusive relationships in that state. And it is a matter of trying to break them out and realize you do have some control. So again, this is why the issue of control is so important to understand with abuse. Because if somebody controls you and controls your mind, then they basically have you, you know?
Exactly.
And it really takes quite a lot of strength and a lot of work to kind of break out of that whole situation.
Which brings us to the next topic, which is breaking out, managing to piece your life back together after enduring that level of psychological and or physical abuse to get back to that personhood that you had before.
Yes.
How is that process from your perspective? How is that process actually facilitated?
Yeah. So that is as you said, that is a process. I'm glad you said it that way because it does take some time. And obviously the decision to leave, which often is where it ends up by the person who's being abused, they have to reach that point by themselves, right? But there are things that we as outsiders can do, which is, I'm associated with Woman Inc. that runs a hotline as well as a shelter for persons, even though it's mainly women,
course, yes.
right? But it is for persons who have been abused or who have been sexually assaulted. And so even being able to reach out to an institution like that or having some kind of social support can help the survivor to kind of plan how are they going to leave, to process what is going on with them, and to decide what is the next step, right? Because having a plan is very important, because just leaving without knowing where you're going and how you're going to manage financially, etc.
Exactly. It makes it much more difficult.
Exactly. And even though somebody on the spur of a moment may leave, if they have no plan, then it's going to be even easier for them to go back. Right. Because it's like, okay, what have I done? Where am I going to know? What am I going to do?
Yes, you do find that.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. So having persons who can support them, whether it is family, friends, as I said, institutions like Woman Inc., who can help them to, as I said, to process what they have been through and where they're going to go next. That's what is going to increase the likelihood that when they leave, it will be a permanent departure.
But curiously, one of the things I came across also when doing some other research for this is that in many cases, persons, their relatives, their friends who love them and see the situation going on, it's very difficult to try and intervene. One, because when you go into somebody's relationship and it's their relationship, you don't want to be that person.
Right.
One, and then two, in many cases, it's not as simple as just going to the person and taking them out of the house and being, because some of it might be illegal. Some of it is just not that simple.
Yes.
Because you might have to convince the person and let the person willingly come with you.
Right.
And what tips can you give persons who may be seeing things like this happening,
Yes.
want to help,
Right.
but want to do it in a way that won't make the situation worse,
Right.
pretty much.
Yeah, very good question. And yes, as you must have realized from our conversation, you knew before, this is so complicated. And as I was saying, the decision to leave, or however the person wants to handle the abuse in the relationship, has to be their own. And it is the first thing and often the hardest thing for us as helpers to accept, because you see the person in pain. It's somebody who you love, or even if it's not somebody you love, but you're still concerned about them. It's somebody you care for, and you just kind of want to rescue them. But you kind of can't rescue them. What you can do is be a good sounding board, right? So when the person wants to vent or share, listen non-judgmentally, right?
If that's possible.
It is possible. It takes practice, right? But it is possible. Just realize they know more about the relationship than you do, because they're in it 24 hours, right? So we may see particular instances where, okay, this is not good, this abuse is not good, but we're not seeing the whole relationship. So as a supporter, as an assistant, you have to accept that, first of all, that you do not know the situation as well as the person who is involved. So you have to go at their pace, at his or her pace. And so being a good sounding board, finding out information, right? Okay, so what are their options? How can I help them to plan to leave if that is what they choose to do? Or if they are choosing not to leave at this very moment,
Support them.
right, how can I support them? And sometimes it can be very frustrating, right? Because you're hearing the person relay a story of abuse, and you're like, okay, and you support, and then a month later, it's a similar story. Right, and which is why I'm saying that the training of us as helpers is really very, very important, because being able to accept that this is a person's decision, realize that this person is an adult, because we're not talking about children, right? We're talking about adults. If it's children, then that's another
different story.
Right,
entirely.
right. So we can't, as you said, we can't go and grab them and take them out of the house. That could be seen as kidnapping.
Exactly.
So realizing the person is adult, helping them, you can ask them questions to challenge the way they're thinking. But it's very important not to try and tell them what they are to do, because what you don't want is that if this person is looking to you for support, and then based on your reaction, the person then shuts you out, right? That means that's minimum.
That's another layer that they have to go through
exactly,
to get to
exactly. So it is hard, and it's a good idea to, kind of practice with other aspects. Because I mean, the same thing. Yes, abuse is extreme, but when your friends tell you about other things in their relationship that you may not like, right, which is not necessarily abuse, but you don't think is necessarily good for the person, train yourself even then, right? You're not going to say, oh, what kind of craziness are you doing? Again, you want to be non-judgmental, and then if it does reach a situation where you're trying to help somebody who is in an abusive relationship, you'd have done some practice with the probably more easier topics, So yeah.
So if there's a person out there who may see this and view this, is there something that you can tell them what's on the other side of they may not be able to see it or receive it at this moment, but we still believe that it's important to let them see what's on the other side of the situation, and show them that life can go on, and it's not it's not end all. Your situation is not the end in itself.
That's right.
Can you say to them persons what that?
Well, I'm going to repeat what you said, right? So yeah, this is not the end all, right? You can survive outside of a relationship that has abuse in it, and yes, it may take work, and when you're ready, you will do it. But know that you do have the strength. Do also know that there is support out there for you, and I'm going to give Woman Inc.'s hotline number, 929-2997. That's 929-2997, and that's 7 days a week. We have our volunteers working as well as our counselors. So call if you just want to vent, that is fine. If it is that you're ready to move on or think about your options, you can also talk that through with your with the volunteers, and seek people in your community or at your workplace who you just get a vibe, again trusting your gut, that you can share with them, but know that there is life beyond this. And you can survive this.
There's a lot more that we could talk to, but we're not gonna. I think we should wrap it up here, just because we don't want to get too long. But I mean, we can always have you back again, and we can discuss this topic even further. And so, in that case, I thank you for joining us. I really hope that you learned something new and you're able to take away information that can maybe be useful to you and help you manage or navigate a situation that you're facing, or somebody that you know or love. And this has been Studio 58A. My name is Vaughn Davis, Dr. Gillian Mason. Follow us on Facebook, like us on Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Thank you for joining us, and have a good day.